infrastructure. Okay, so, and Brian is up first.
I'll just do a quick, have people used Hpricot? So like, you know, sort of a third of the group. Have people used other screen scraping kinds of libraries for HTML parsing? What, just kind of shout them out?
Use Kapow. It's a whole tool. What do you get from Tidy? Beautiful suit.
So we're gonna. This is really just, you know, it's sort of wanderings with, and it's sort of, it really is intended to be just an appetizer for sort of greater things to come. But so what I'm going to basically do is sort of, you know, describe a little bit about the library, of the functionality, point to sort of, you know, what's available online, and show a demo of stuff where I actually used it. You know, it's much for fun as anything else, but it certainly works, and it works well, and it is fast, which I think is one of its sort of main features, that chunks of code were certainly borrowed from existing open source applications and toolkits, and a lot of it was just kind of, it seems to me, coded probably pretty tightly in C. So what we have is it's described as a fast, enjoyable HTML parser for Ruby. Of course, it's written by the famous Y, the Lucky Stiff, who just seems to be incredibly prolific when it comes to producing code that's like incredibly high quality and great performance. It's out here, and actually let me just grab this and we'll kind of go to it. Just to sort of show you what's out there. The documentation is actually, I've found good. I haven't used this extensively, so really this is intended to be just a sort of appetizer. But it certainly described what I needed. The other thing is you can basically parse through the HTML using two different approaches. The XPath kinds of stuff, that people used it with the XPath accessors, a few, very few. Other people used it with CSS accessors, a few more nods. So that sort of is the recommended way to go about doing it. And although the documentation is actually somewhat mixed, it seems to me, in terms of how it describes what the different pieces are. But we'll come back to that. The other thing I'm going to do is just bring up, as we're here, the Eclipse environment, which is sort of how I've got the example code embedded in my application. So essentially what it is, it's a screen, it's an HTML parser. It digs through the stuff, it makes a lot of sense of the stuff. In addition to being really fast, it's also sort of generally recognized as being fairly forgiving. That if the HTML isn't super well formed, it does reasonable things with it. The objective of it is really to be able to parse through, but also to change the HTML. I strictly used it for parsing through, but there are examples on the website as well that demonstrate how you can actually change stuff, which is really pretty cool. So just to look at the code in brief here, so you require these different libraries, and I'm not quite sure why you have to require the traverse. Anybody know as well? But basically the traversal is essentially the mechanism by which you sort of crawl through this stuff. My particular application was I wanted to grab financial information. Anybody work for Yahoo or Google? Or I don't know, to be honest with you, to what extent screen scraping is legitimate. I guess if you're going to republish this stuff, you might have somebody coming after you. But what I really wanted to get was information that's available for free from Google Finance. You could pay for it from Morningstar. And I wanted to sort of, it's only for one class of securities, mutual funds, which probably most people in the room have. And it's got a lot of really neat data, which we'll kind of get to. In fact, I'll pull it up right now. It's sort of risk data, which is the extent to which, as the market tanked today, people may be sensitive to how likely their investments are to continue tanking. And so the information that Google has available, well, why not? Let's just kind of we'll run it and show you how it works. So if this made it from here to there, what it's doing now is it's going out over the net. It's grabbing some, it's hitting the. I mean, it's just that fast. It just is. It's shocking to me. So I went to financegoogle.com, dug through their website for this ticker symbol over on the right, and also for that ticker symbol. And what it found was the data, and we'll show you where it is. To this information. So here's there's all sorts of stuff out here, right? And this is like really valuable. This is really interesting information if you're interested in this sort of stuff. And top 10 holdings, and it can be kind of a nuisance to pull this stuff out. I originally got into this with an interest in something called XBRL, which is Extensible Business Reporting Language. Somebody has actually heard of it. Wow, that's impressive. It's kind of like a derivative of, well, it's in XML, and it's a business reporting language that's kind of coming on strong. The SEC is basically advocating that large publicly held companies submit their documents, their financial reports, in XBRL. And then you could process it more easily. But it's new technology, and it's kind of taken a long time to come along. And really what I was interested in is like this stuff down here. So the question is, how do you get that stuff down there with, there's no API. It'd be great if like Google made an API available. But there's nothing there. And so, how do you dig it out? And the way I chose to dig it out was using this. The other thing that I actually do here that I use the Screen Scraper for is to pull out the name, which you might think, geez, it ought to be easy to pull out for a ticker symbol the name, but in fact I've got a little routine here that grabs the name too. So we'll just jump back into the code just to kind of show you how it works. Here we go. So it's not really, there's not a tremendous amount to it. Include the libraries, and then put up some sort of descriptive text. Then you go in and you open up, and actually you can access the information a lot of different ways. You can, this one, I just go in and I open up the URL, and then I've got these tables, these arrays that I've set up, which defines the information I want. So what I've done is I can pull out the alpha or the beta or the mean annual return. And all I'm doing is I'm basically going in, I'm looking for the appropriate tags within the HTML, and then probably the only really tricky part was figuring, kind of parsing through the tables and rows. Have people done that before? It's actually not usually difficult. And the API that he has it's got this next sibling thing, so you just kind of chunk right through it and pull it out, and then return the information in array form that you might want. So here's just kind of so it's amazing software, darn good documentation. It's online. The approach I used was CSS selectors. And is everybody who's like an expert in CSS, or is like everybody an expert in CSS? It seems to be, they sort of describe it as you just use the CSS selectors, like, okay, if then else, right? And but nowhere can I find really what the definitive text is on what the standard is for CSS selectors. But if you kind of dig through this, you can figure out that in fact, actually I got it right. Well, we can go to it. But there's essentially what it is it's essentially it maps to the element structure, the attribute structure, and then you can pull out the contents of what's inside the HTML. And you can pick out like ID tags and different tags. And it looks to be actually, and especially I think with the newer versions of HTML, in fact becoming more of a fixed standard and more structured. And I think the newer browsers are probably better at enforcing well-formed HTML that previously people could get away with a lot, and so it made it more difficult for tools like this to work. But it actually works really quite well. A derivative work, has anybody heard of this, this MoFo? It's a microformat parser. People know what microformats are, and it's based on Hpricot, Apricot. I'm quite sure really how you pronounce it. But the amazing thing about this software, and I think Wise Work in particular, is that there's so much derivative stuff that spins off of it. He puts it all out there, and it's great open source stuff, and it always seems to be high quality. And to be honest with you, to a certain extent, I thought that how would you get something like that to come talk at a group like this? And would people be interested if you could fly him in from on his magic carpet from wherever? He probably has, most people have. Anyways, yeah. So, would people be willing to help pitch in instead of the price you'd pay to go to a movie to get Y in town? It certainly would be technologically sophisticated, and I'm sure quite entertaining.
Has anyone ever seen him speak?
Yes.
Is he really just one person? I guess that's
I've only seen one photo.
Yeah, there's a couple photos on Flickr. That's about it.
There's an online video of him speaking at RailsConf last year, and if you're thinking of inviting him, you're advised to watch it first to see what you're going to get.
It's not a talk.
It's not a talk, right?
It's a multimedia extravaganza.
It's a multimedia extravaganza.
I don't think a line of code is ever shown.
Right.
No, there was some pretty cool stuff in his talk. Something like symbol to proc. So like just some really whacked out tricks, but within Flash animations.
Yeah.
So it's not your typical.
Now we're longing.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
Could you maybe show us like a line of like a big line of like Hpricot that like
parses out a particular item from HTML.
Absolutely, sure.
I'm just curious about the syntax.
Yep. So what we do here is, the way I set this up is I basically build a search expression, okay? And it's going to look for, my search expression here is basically this TD, which is, who knows what that is in HTML stuff? What's that? And, and you can use this sort of text function to search for a particular kind of text. For me, this is the search tag, and the tag is basically what I've defined as these are the tags: alpha star, beta star. So I'm in sort of deep doo-doo if there's like alpha star all over the place in these documents. But it turns out that sort of within a table, sort of as the header into a row, it's just fairly unique.
Does the HTML have to be well formed, or how does it work against badly formed?
The only really websites that I've used it against is the Google stuff, and so I've had no problems at all, and I attribute that as much to Google's well-formedness as other experiences.
Will this work with? I mean, it's assumed that you already have the HTML, so you use OpenURI or something else to fetch it. What if it's behind an SSL, OpenSSL, certificate, kind of deal, like client-side search?
Yeah.
It just assumes that you fetched it.
It assumes. I mean, I fetched it using the right there. This is where I kind of grab it from.
Right. So Hpricot there has like OpenURI built into it, I guess. No, you're using it. Open has been overloaded.
Right.
When you require a URI, you can just call open.
Yeah. It knows FTP.
Right. There's and let's see if I can just quickly jump over to the places where it sort of describes. Here he requires OpenURI. He gives you, this is his sort of standard example, but he does give other examples elsewhere where, sort of the HTML comes in from different places.
I just want to, is this the documentation that you were saying was darn good? Because I think, well, it's pretty, I think it's pretty good. I just wonder if
you qualify it somewhat.
Yes.
Actually the other.
I mean, it's just really there's a lot more stuff going on than what he covers in those couple pages.
Are you looking at? But isn't there a wiki and also a doc site hosted on RubyForge that is like well formatted? Because he usually does that for his projects.
There is, and I'm pretty sure that this is the
probably be
URL.
hpricot.rubyforge.org.
I think this is the URL for it. But if you want to just put on the table some of the stuff that you found that like he didn't cover, or that'd be great to hear. Were there actually things that you sort of discovered on your own, or?
But just through the,
This.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So this, right. So this is basically he replicates what he has on the tidbit part.
In a little different form, yeah.
And then otherwise I was just looking at the RDoc stuff, and I think there's space for someone to write a really nice little tutorial on this.
Actually, I completely agree. Yeah. I guess I was, sort of my level of what's the mean average of what's available. And the other thing that he has is he has a mailing list, which I don't know if anybody is on. I actually just got on it, so I don't know what is available. But he didn't start it actually that long ago. So, but if you're interested in sort of, because he acknowledges that there's stuff that he wants to keep doing with this, and apparently a fair amount of traffic and interest. In the back?
I think this question was sort of asked earlier, but does anybody here who's had experience with Hpricot know how resilient it is to malformed HTML? I know that the RubyForge Soup library is actually pretty good at that. And no. All right, thanks.
My understanding is that it's pretty resilient. I don't know how it compares to Beautiful Soup, but I've heard that it works pretty well with crap.
Yeah, one of its documented claims, although there may be a lot that aren't documented, is I think that it's it sort of has a good ancestry here, and so that it should be pretty good with stuff that isn't that well formed. But that's what I've heard. No experience with it. So really, in the course of maybe it took me half a day or something like that, a couple hours to do something like this, and for me, I thought, gosh, how am I going to get this data? How am I going to get this information? And in the span of just a couple of hours from the point of downloading it, the stuff worked as promised. There were, sort of no blue screens or crashes or other sort of unreliabilities that you might anticipate. And I did try using the XPath stuff, which I sort of thought I quasi knew a little bit about. And he says in the documentation, he sort of steers you away from that into CSS land. And you know, the CSS worked fine. The XPath was pretty just, I mean, in general, it seems really incomprehensible, but not, I don't think because of the implementation so much as, it's just not fully
The
supported.
CSS is likely to be a lot more stable
Right.
sites going forward too, and Google can sort of change their tree at any point, but they're less likely to thrash the IDs and element tags around.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the biggest reason.
And I think that's a really good point, because I think when I first thought about this, that, you know, when you're screen scraping, you think, well, you're sort of at the whim of the website, you know, the portal owner to changing. But the problem is if they change it, that, you know, they're going to have other downstream repercussions.
No question. Yeah, and even when you talked about searching for an alpha star or beta star or something, a lot of that stuff is tagged within big divs and, you know, with elements on it, so you can parse through even confusing situations if you're fluent enough in that.
I mean, if you think about the what ifs, so here are the what ifs that, you know, so one question is what about the well-formed, how robust is it? Another question is what about graphics? How could you grab graphics stuff, in particular charts? Some of the things are, you know, these are really dynamic, interactive, and in this case it sort of depends upon where you have the mouse to make it sort of useful. It seems like most of these things are preformed when they're put up there, so you really actually can't extract the information from it. Some of the other things that I've done, just grabbing like data out of Yahoo through CSV files, it's, you know, sort of a data-intensive scraping exercise. It's, you know, they just have URLs that you plug in, like dates and what you're looking for, and it feeds you back the information. So it's sort of a different way of getting data out. But any ideas on how you'd actually grab graphics? Could you grab graphics?
I had maybe potentially a related question. Are there any tools or methods in there to handle JavaScript? Or is there a JavaScript interpreter for Ruby? I'm just not familiar if there is.
So Ajax generated content?
Yeah.
Would be a common case.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, I
don't
guess.
think there's an interpreter.
What's that?
I don't think there is a
Okay.
JavaScript interpreter.
Are you talking specifically about like with Apricot or with?
Yeah.
Yeah. The I'm just gonna do a quick search here because it seemed to me that that was something that was on the radar screen and that.
Well, if you wanted an image, though, you'd get the image URL out of the image tag and make a separate request for the image.
Right. So you can do it. You can do it that way.
If you do the same for Ajax. If it's a dynamic image, I don't think there would be a good way of grabbing it.
Right. You're just kind of stuck with whatever the state is when you pull it up. Yeah. I read something, you know, about the JavaScript. I read something that seemed to indicate that they're going to try and do more with it, but don't know. So really, that's you know, the idea is just to, if there was something out there, I think the websites are actually fairly robust and solid. And so if there's something out there that's useful, that's interesting, that, you know, doesn't have an RSS feed or doesn't neatly sort of spit out CSV files or isn't available in some other way. In fact, you've got tools like this that really work. They're not too difficult. They have, you know, enough documentation to get you started anyways. And then, yeah, questions?
Yeah, the other question too is, let's say you had a web page that didn't have a SO service attached to it, but just had an HTML form. Can this, are there anything, I assume you could easily screen scrape with this and then build your own sort of API to access that?
Yeah, the way this starts is, I wasn't, you know, sort of what happens is he just goes out and he grabs the whole thing, in essence. I mean, I think you probably can grab subsets of it. But then, and then what you do is you start to, you process, you get a DOM object that, you know, and then you can do anything you want with them. I mean, you could sort of parse out big chunks of it or sections of it, and the API is set up in such a way that you can get like all the paragraph tags and all the, you know, all generic kinds of chunks of things. And then you can process it any way that you want, and then update it and sort of push it back. And is that sort of what you're thinking? Yeah. So you pull it all in at one time.
One other thing, I think some people are using this as a way to do like acceptance testing of your website, right? You create the website and you're wondering if what you think it's doing, it is doing, so you might as well just scrape yourself and see if it comes out. And I think another angle would be, I think it's what, water and selenium, so you would actually drive the website and it would say, yeah, I actually found this and didn't find this, so that may be able to be some way of getting around the whole JavaScript thing, because supposedly, I haven't done this, but what I've read, you know, actually will be running, so you should be able to see whether or not it's actually producing what you expect it to be producing.
Selenium can do that Sony will drive.
Yeah, right. That's from what I've seen. I haven't.
In fact, there's a plugin for Selenium on Rails that you can basically, write your tasks in Ruby.
Yeah, question in the middle and then in the back.
I just want, someone else has developed something combining Mechanize and Hpricot. It's called something like Scrub. It's SCRUBYT. I don't know how you pronounce it, but
yeah.
I haven't tried this, but he's pushing it pretty hard. It looked like it was, it looked interesting to me.
Yeah. Hey, look, that's actually what I started with, and I mean, I tried it. And that was the first hour, actually. So it took me 2 hours. That was the first one. This hour worked. So it just might have been, it's going to do some nice, very nice stuff. But I actually get to a point where it just was like, when I sort of realized that basically what he had done is he had built it on top of this, and then I said, this kind of gives me what I want, but I think he gives. I'm trying to think, was it more control, more programmatic?
There's nothing to navigate within Hpricot, as you point out. You can open your eye to it. So
yeah.
So I mean, I did something using water, just driving through, just clicking through, let's say using water, and then doing the scraping on Hpricot. I think he's doing a similar thing, just combining Mechanize and Hpricot in a single API to two of them.
Yeah. Was there a question in the back?
Yeah, sorry, it was a little unclear. Couldn't tell if you guys were saying, when I've used Beautiful Soup or Beautiful Soup before, it automatically cleans the HTML and it's very easy to get a cleaned up version of the page that you got in. Is that also the case with Hpricot? Okay.
So if it finds stuff that's kind of messy, it sort of cleans it up.
Yeah.
And would that be?
To close up tags and to close and stuff.
And so that would be what sort of is in the DOM, object that's sort of in memory. If you were to write that back out again, it would be cleaned up, presumably. Okay. I don't know to what extent people would actually use this to update websites. Is that a practical application? I mean, because he gives the functionality where, I used it just for reading things in and pulling data chunks and elements, but he gives numerous examples where you can also update and change.
Can this follow links and do the equivalent of Perl Mechanize, if people have seen that before, which is the actual driving?
That's why you would combine it with something like Mechanize or Water. It's just
Water is like Mechanize. I've never.
Oh yeah, so it's web application testing in Ruby.
Okay.
That's what it
Cool.
stands for. I think those two. There's a Firewater now that drives Firefox. Water itself drives IE.
Cool.
And
okay.
I found that. I think that's a great tool.
Yeah.
I use that to navigate, and then Hpricot to
parse.
Yeah.
Cool. Parse. Good. Anything else? Great. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.